Next one was one from, actually, this was really quite funny as well, because Dan posted this one. This is from the Vitalik rant that happened. And then I hadn't realized he'd done it, and I found it like an hour later, and I was like, shit, that's going on. That's got to go on Community Token Talk. And so I put it in the room, and then I just scrolled up one. I saw Dan's, like, oh, Dan's beating me to the punch. So this is Vitalik's, I guess you could call it a rant. It's his set of, what does he call them, contradictions about Ethereum. And we've been predicting this for ages, Dan. The guy's in his mind trying to rationalize how he keeps Ethereum decentralized when he's got these massive stakeholders and then move into proof of stake. And it's just really playing with his mind, I think. So he's made him write this tweet. And I posted it in the room, so I'll let you go into some of the details of it.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them, but we'll start with this one. The desire. So it says, contradiction between my desire to see Ethereum become a layer one that can survive truly extreme circumstances, and the realization that many key apps on Ethereum already rely on far more fragile security assumptions than anything we consider acceptable in Ethereum protocol design. So, I mean, first of all, that's pretty much saying the first red flag here is the Ethereum fees are too high. Therefore, there is no such thing as a layer 2 on Ethereum. And I know that might shock a lot of people. It's not a true layer 2. It's a layer 1 and another layer 1 communicating. That's all it is. And it's a very weird circumstance because the layer 1 communicating with Ethereum has to have the security of Ethereum. It can't be like, oh, well, we hold your data, but we're not as secure as Ethereum. You could be hacked. It doesn't make any sense because all of your tokens are still relying on that layer 2, quote unquote, security. So assuming that the security has to be that of a layer 1, it's like all you're doing is, okay, we have this layer 1 security. We're going to batch a bunch of transactions and we're going to ping Ethereum as little as possible, right? Because it's super expensive and we can't do it. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars to run Splinterlands on Ethereum, for example. So they're doing these batching, they're doing all these, trying to do ZK rollups, all these things to try to interact with Ethereum as least as possible. It's like, well, why are you interacting with Ethereum? What's the point? Why don't you just stay on your own ecosystem? It's like, oh, well, that's all the liquidity is. So it's saying, okay, Ethereum's main edge here is it was a first mover advantage and it gained a lot of liquidity. It's like a giant lake, but it's really useless because you actually don't want to interact with it because it's expensive. You hurt yourself every time you talk to it. So it's like, well, so if that liquidity is gone, then Ethereum is literally useless. You wouldn't use it for anything. Like you wouldn't say that about Hive. You use Hive any day of the week because you need the bandwidth. You're not, it's not so much about liquidity. It's so much about usability. So it's just a very interesting topic because he's pretty much thinking in his head, okay, so I forced everyone with the high fees on the chain to create their own layer 1s to interact with Ethereum, which is incredibly difficult. And they're all VC funded because that's really the only way you're going to get these things up and make any sense, because it's like, oh, we're on Ethereum, we're layer 2, so we can raise $100 million. So everything is dominated by centralized infrastructure. And of course, everyone likes convenience, so everyone's using the centralized infrastructure like OpenSea, all these things, whom are all big investors in all the quote-unquote layer 2s. Go look at every layer 2 that people talk about. Coinbase Ventures, A16, whatever those, nothing but venture capitalists own them. They own them. They are centralized entities that have a multi-database system. It's not even a blockchain. It's just
MetaMask.
It's just two or three guys with the same server, redundant. So I mean, it's
MetaMask and the API they're using. It's all the same stuff. It all falls back.
One call to AWS, boys. One call.
Built it without an incentive layer. Yeah, he built it without an incentive layer. So it's like I don't know what he expected. It's not a contradiction. This isn't even theory. Like I can't even stretch this in theory and be a devil's advocate and make it make sense. It's like you're trying to be a lawyer and you have a murderer and everyone knows he's a murderer. It's like I think the dude killed the person. There's nothing I can say. Like there's no way you can stretch this. Of course it's centralized. How else in theory can you make it uncentralized if you have the high fees, no incentive layer, VC funded quote unquote layer 2s that have to have their own layer 1 security? How can you make that decentralized? In my head, you can't. And I'm rooting for Ethereum. I'm rooting for all open source tech. Really, I'm rooting for Ethereum because I hope they keep chugging out free open source software that we can maybe borrow one day. That's my my greedy hope, but I also, small hope in me hopes somehow distribution fixes itself, which is a laugh, but someone can dream. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting that he's calling these all contradictions when it's almost like ordained in the design. And now you move the proof of stake. That's the nail in the coffin. Proof of work's the only thing keeping Ethereum somewhat censorship resistant on the base layer. You don't have a pre-mine in proof of work. You'd have to do a very vicious attack that costs a lot of money. It doesn't get you that far. It's what proof of work's about: high security, low usability. You move the proof of stake, yeah, sure, you'll get that usability, but now you got to deal with coin voting and welcome to the jungle. If you have a pre-mine, you're out of there. You don't exist. You're already eliminated. Not even a contender, in my opinion.
That was very well demonstrated. I don't think it's been realised, but it was very well demonstrated last week with the USDT. The moment when D Kwon sold his pre-mine as an OTC trade for billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, that was the moment it went wrong. And it allowed the short sellers to open huge short positions without moving the market on the upside. And it's just this natural human tendency to ruin a kind of initial ICO stake that keeps getting exploited. And again, this will only accumulate into founders being forked out. I think if they've got significant ICOs, they'll get forked out. I'm starting to see this as a thing. We're pretty busy with Speak Network, but maybe eventually when that thing finishes in the next kind of 6 months to a year, we'll be able to open a company, Dan, that just focuses on forking existing chains with and moving the founder stakes into DAOs.
Adding them, forking the chains and adding them into some honeycomb-like technology where we can have a node-of-node systems and sort of just...
And you're doing drops to the existing community plus another community that you know is decentralized and balancing that up somehow. That could be quite an interesting vulture decentralized capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, I came from the ghetto growing up. We reused everything. So I'm looking around here. I'm like, why are we built? Like, look at what they're building. It's already open source. Let's go use that. What are we doing? Why are we wasting time?
I mean, to me, like in the old world of IP and everything like that, it's kind of a little bit immoral. But in the new world of Web3 and open source, it's like you guys got paid. It's like, look at Arweave, right? They did like an 80% pre-mine. They got paid big for their technology, and rightly so. They're good guys, right? They're clever. They've built some great technology, great principles around the technology. But the compromises that they took is giving themselves that pre-mine, and then it's like, well, and we're obviously borrowing that technology to some extent for the Speak Network for the way we store in our distributed storage systems peer to peer in the community. And that's fine by me. I have no issue. Like, I don't even feel like if those guys didn't get paid, maybe they built this technology and then their ICO didn't take off or whatever, I'd feel a little bit like, oh, this is a bit, we should talk to them and bring them in. But because they built it for free, gave it away for free, and they made bank on it, right? And I don't think they did it in the right way that benefits their community. I'm like, yeah, let's take this technology and use it, right? And actually decentralize it.
True open source technology, if you build it, you want it to be used, you want it to be modified, you want it to be forked. If you're actually here for the spirit of it. And the fact that they got paid and what we would consider misused, right? Because they built a tech, but then they sneakily built it in a centralizing way where it defeats the purpose. It's like, oh, I have this amazing car, but it doesn't have rims. It's like, oh, great. So, I mean, it's the same thing that they did with their technology. It's amazing looking. You can do a lot with it, but what they did with it isn't the way, and it's not the way. So.
And I'm of the same view of the Speak Network. Once that stuff's built and it's out there, if the token distribution happened in a way that was either corrupt or didn't quite work in a decentralized way, and now the community isn't really decentralized, I would applaud anyone that goes and takes a copy of that and does a new token distribution that actually brings in more opportunities to make sure that thing stays decentralized, because that's the key thing to me. It's like how of all these technologies that people are building with decentralization, so-called decentralization, Web 2.5. So how key is it to actually have it decentralized, and how have you stayed close to that original vision? And every single one hasn't managed it, right? It's always moved away, and now it's like, yeah. So fork the technology, copy it, make a new version, and do a drop that gives the thing a better chance of actually being decentralized. That's got to be the spirit of this whole thing. And people, leaders of these, founders of these technologies should be holding themselves to that account,
Yeah, I mean, so I give Vitalik here a little bit of I give him some flack, but I give him credit because it's like at the beginning, it's like how we built this tech. There's nothing out there. Like either I get funded and have a team, or it just doesn't exist. I can't do it on my own. And like being a little bit naive, thinking, is a proof of work. Maybe there's not we're going to have a sale. Although a lot of people think they knew they were switching to coin voting the whole time, but there's a lot going on in the early days when you're the first. So it's like, okay, he had a raise, built the technology, open sourced it. It's like, okay, it's not evil, right? It's like, I don't think that he had malintentions. I think now he's sort of like, you have to, you reap the bud you sow. I think he's sort of like having to walk in these shoes now that he's uncomfortable in. But nowadays, with all this open source tech, it's like I just roll my eyes when I see $100 million raise to create decentralized this. And it's like, you gotta be kidding me. It's like the mule is dead. Y'all done stomped its face in. There's no value left. It's like, why are you guys still raising money? It's like everything's already built. It's like, yeah, you can improve it. But it's like, do you really need to fucking have a whole another raise to keep doing the same thing over and over again when you can actually take the tech that's out there, fork it, and have a community. You don't need $100 million now.
This is really interesting because it's like they're moving along in really small baby step phases, because it's like you've got all these other virtual machines that either were built separately to Ethereum to combat against Ethereum and try and beat it, these so-called Ethereum killers, or now even the forks that have taken to Ethereum technologies and forked away, but somehow the community's allowed them to put a shit ton of tokens in their own pockets, and now they're centralized. Even though what they do is so what they've done is they've solved a technical problem with Ethereum in making the technology quicker by coming up with some form of like centralization to the chain and having that compromise. But they've still managed to centralize the thing. And now you see Vitalik coming out, and he's not talking about the technology here. He's talking about the ideology about what he's done and keeping it decentralized. And it's like now these other fans, that trickles down to them. And it's like we're still screaming here saying, look, we did both. We did the technological solution and the moral, sticking to the moral vision of what decentralization is at the same time. So I'm imagining now the next phase in this is people such as Vitalik maybe or other people around that community saying, okay, we're going to fork Ethereum. We're actually going to do a genuine distributed raise here, or a genuine decentralized distribution, and see what happens there. But by which time, hopefully, Hive will be in the mix there as well, because it's already done all that stuff. It's solved those issues.
I mean, that would be like a movie-esque plot if it's like he's like, I'm biting the bullet, I'm positioning myself, playing chess, and when I feel like the tech is built and I've got enough centralized funding, it's like, all right, I don't need this anymore. He just stands up and is like, we're going to do a community fork. I know all the bad wallets, or quote unquote, centralizing wallets. We're going to do some kind of way to earn. That would be absolutely amazing. He'd become a mini hero in my eyes if he actually pulled that off. Do I believe in it? I don't know. It's almost believing in fairy tales, but it's possible, and it would be entertaining, and I wouldn't put it past him. He seems like the kind of guy, especially with this behavior lately. It's almost like, have you ever seen a hostage and they're like talking on the phone, or they're talking on the video, and like they're kind of like tapping their nose, they're doing like something like let you know they're. It seems like I'm getting that kind of vibe. It's almost like he's just like cries for help. If you read his blogs, they're progressively moving away from coin voting. It's like he's trying to warn us of something. So.
Yeah. I'll count his blinks and look for Morse code the next time I watch a video of him.
It's probably there, Brian. You'll be the guy to figure this out. There'll be this like Vitalik conspiracy community come up on Hive.
Except he'll be
reading in all Morse code behind all of his blogs.
Except there'll be some ultra unbelievable encryption system that nobody else on earth but him could understand.
You
can't go wrong then. You can say whatever you want then, Brian. But just coming back to this one last point here, like there's a lot of ecosystems around Hive you can see this happening in, but certainly in the wider crypto community, the wider crypto world, the ability to just find yourself a dev or two, copy the software, fix the Hive fee issues and the non-compromises they're made with decentralization, and then distribute the stake to genuinely distributed communities that are distributed. They've been distributed for a number of years. That's a real powerful thing, in my opinion. And I'm truly surprised why there isn't groups of people going around and doing that. They're like hostile, decentralized takeovers, basically.
Yeah. The funny thing, I'll try to make this quick. The funny thing I look at
but
Ethereum.
in a truly decentralized way instead of, yeah.
I look at Ethereum as a layer 2. It's a smart contract platform. And I think Dan Larimer learned from Bitcoin. If you look at Hive, very similar to the Bitcoin model, except obviously we have the text storage. But what we did was we stripped all smart contract. It's a transaction layer. If you look at Hive, it's what the Lightning Network is trying to be. Hive is a transaction layer. It keeps your account data, and you can send instant, fast, feeless transactions. On top of that, you can interact with smart contracts that don't bloat or slow down the chain. Ethereum built on top of a Bitcoin model, right? So if you took Ethereum and you removed all you made it just smart contracts and you plugged in the Hive account system, Hive as the transaction layer, and you had Ethereum sitting on top of Hive, you have a very sexy layer 2 on top of Hive that could do a lot of things, and it takes all of the bloat off Ethereum because now you can send Ethereum transactions fast, feeless, instant. That is the way it should have been built, but he built it ass backwards, meaning he tried to jam everything in one. Yeah, so that's the big problem.
It's like, to me, it's like every piece of information that doesn't change much, that's fundamental to the ecosystem, goes on layer 1. So accounts don't change that much, followers lists, communities, they're like base data that can go on the base layer, and that technology needs to be built there and stored there and run there. Everything else can go off to like smart contracts where you got a contract executing and that's changing from time to time, and also anything that you need to change, you'll build the first version of it, you need to change it a few times. Just put that shit on layer 2, and it just makes it so much easier. It makes the chain lighter, means the community can fork it easier. Just everything about it.
Chain is much more secure as well. So you don't have to worry about a smart contract breaking on layer 1. If a smart contract breaks on layer 2, it's easy to fork that.
Exactly.
There's so many things you can do, right? You don't have to roll back a layer. Like imagine if the DAO hack was a layer 2 instead of layer 1. You don't have to roll back an entire layer 1, right? You can just fork a layer 2. Then much easier. You wouldn't have Ethereum Classic.
So the message to the founders there of these other chains is Dan's just given you the lesson. If you want to avoid the psychological problems that Vitalik is clearly starting to have, you can do what Dan just said, and you can avoid them altogether in your lives.
Yeah. And one quick point. The next one he says, a contradiction between things he loves for decentralization, democracy, and a realization that he agrees with intellectual elites instead of the people.
Oh yeah.
So he's basically so he's basically describing delegated proof of stake because the people are incredibly powerful, right? They may not be smart, but they know what pain is and they know what's best for them. And the worst models is having one person, like the president. If you look at a president model, I don't really like that model. The delegated proof of stake model, you have 20 presidents, and each one of these presidents is holding the other one accountable because they want, they're jostling for position, and it's like, oh, this guy's fucking, they're really honest with each other. So it's sort of like having a bunch of different alpha animals in the same room where they know they can eat each other, so they respect each other. But if one slip in, they're all gonna. We saw that with the hostile takeover. There was one witness, Tim Cliff, amazing. He's been a top witness since the beginning. And they both dropped instantly when they disagreed with the consensus, and the community's smart enough. So yeah, the community's not smart enough to make in the moment decisions. They're like, look, I trust this guy. This guy is smart. Let's put block trades. Or I trust a Smooth. I know that guy's doing good. But the moment it's like Smooth's doing crazy things. He's up, he's hurting the chain. He's attacking Hive. People are like, oh, that's bad, right? No good. The pitchforks come out, right? That's where the power of the people is. But you have to give the people power. And that's a delegated proof of stake. And they can unvote your ass very quickly. So I agree with him. And that's why delegated proof of stake is so amazing, because it gives the ordinary person who doesn't know much enough to vote people in. And it's obvious from there when you have 20, not one, the stench is going to come out. Oh, this witness is doing bad. And now you go plead to the people, the voters, and the people are like, oh, yeah, that's obvious. That guy's bad. Let's unvote them and vote somebody else in. And then they go about their day. That's how it works.
Yeah.
I think that is how it always is going to work in practice. So
you agree. See, you agree with that. And I agree with that as well. That's why I'm on DPoS. But with a proof of stake, pure proof of stake, which is where Ethereum's going, you can't have that. Because those people become the people that can buy themselves into those positions, right? Yep. Whereas on DPoS, you actually have to be voted in and held accountable. And so that's more. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's far more of a legit model than just having a proof of stake and then saying, "Oh, we believe in an intellectual elite." Well, yeah, you kind of do, but you also believe in a rich elite that can buy themselves or bribe themselves into those positions, and that's where the whole thing starts to fall down, right? At least it doesn't have
exactly. I
representation.
mean, you need much more voting power. Like, if you're one witness that can vote yourself in delegated proof of stake, that means you have more than 51% of all circulating voting power, and that means you have a centralized broken chain. But with proof of stake, you can do that, and that's a feature. That's a part of the game. You have the most stake. It doesn't matter how much stake. It can be 5% or whatever. You're the top validator because you're voting for yourself. You can't delegate your vote. So yeah, it's just like it's the worst. It gives the people no voice, and the only way they get a voice is if they do a ghetto delegation, which is basically like, hey, I'm going to go to a staking pool, and I have to go to whatever staking pool is in town. It's usually going to be one with a lot of liquidity, a centralized one, because those are the convenience monsters. The whole thing is set up to be taken by centralized infrastructure and centralized liquidity providers.
I like that. We're going to have the They Call Me Dan thesaurus of decentralization, a ghetto delegation. That's a new one.
Yep.
That one before.